Some individual stock stories that are quite interesting to track is TD Bank seeking to raise about $14 billion in a Schwab stake exit. They want to get rid of that entire stake in Charles Schwab. So we wanted to get more on this with Paul Goldberg, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Equities Analyst. Paul, what did you make of this? Like, why would they do this? Is this just strategic, or is there something else going on?
I don't think it's necessarily strategic, Alex. I think it's partially to simplify the business. Also, TD got hit with AML investigation and was fined and got an earnings cap, got an asset cap in the U.S., so they can't really grow in the U.S. much larger on the banking side. It sounds like they're trying to simplify the business, have an ability to buy back some stock, have some extra capital on hand.
Where does TD's business currently stand? If you were to give us a broader perspective, how is it lining up against competitors?
Well, I think that you have to look at it in two different areas. One in Canada. So in Canada, they're one of the largest banks across personal and commercial banking. In the U.S., they, again, one of the largest banks, but they're very much personally focused all over the East Coast of the U.S.
So what is it going to take for them to get their asset cap raised in the U.S.?
I think it'll take a long time.
But what's the problem that the Fed highlighted?
Well, the Fed highlighted is the AML deficiencies, which they're trying to fix. It costs them a lot of money. They invested in it, but it can take years. So if we'll look at what's happening to Wells Fargo, we're in 8 years, and they're still trying to get out from under that.
Yeah, and it always seems like nebulous. It's like we have an asset cap, but it's not like you check these 3 boxes and it's gone. Right. It's sort of like, well, at least for Wells Fargo, because it's like risk management, it's controls, it's making sure that everyone's on board, doing the right thing at the right time, which can be very difficult.
What do you take away from this idea of the repurchasing of its stock?
For TD or for Schwab, they're both
kind of
doing. So for TD, I think they're repurchasing only a fraction of that. So the stake in Canadian dollars is about 20 billion. So that 14 billion, they're repurchasing only 8. So the impact on TD shares from the sale of Schwab shares is about 7% of the earnings. They're going to repurchase back 6. So mostly neutralize that kind of impact. The rest is going to add about a whole point of capital to them, so that they can be invested in other sides of the business, but because they're kept in the U.S., which makes it very challenging because they'll have to figure ways to reinvest it either into capital markets, which they're doing right now, or domestically. With Schwab, they only buying 1% of the 10% stake that's being sold, but TD is still keeping the depository relationship, so I think it's strategic more on the TD side rather than having any impact on the Schwab side.
Is this bad news for the Schwab side of things?
I don't think so. That's what I'm saying. It's a strategic decision on TD's side to simplify their business. They're still keeping the deposit relationship, which clearly says that they're working well with Schwab. And TD is going to book a decent gain on sale and this kind of thing. So I think there's nothing wrong with the Schwab. It's just big stake of the company is going up in the open market.
Right.
Totally switching to TD and their actual Canadian business. How are they doing there?
They're doing pretty well, right? So they're second largest bank domestically, right after the RBC. They've been very consistent, right? On the mortgage side, on their commercial operations and everywhere. So they've been doing well, but it's an extremely competitive market. That's why the concern is that they're going to have this all extra capital that they're going to try to invest domestically into a super competitive market.
And breakdown in Canada, there's fewer banks than we have, 1 million over here. So how do they shake up in terms of their competition in Canada? How do they line up there?
Well, their competition, there are 6 largest banks, or some people call it 5+1, because National Bank is a little bit smaller, even though they just finalizing the closure of Canadian Western Bank that's going to expand them a little bit. But some people describe that market as a competitive monopoly between these banks. So there's some smaller banks and credit unions, but these banks control 90+% of deposits and loans in the country. So very, very concentrated. And they compete very aggressively against everything. So the market shares, when you see them shift, we're talking about basis points here and there from period to period.
All right, Paul, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Paul Goldberg, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Equity Analyst.